Oh my, I see. We got a whole lot of people, so that's good. Thanks everybody for joining. I'm John White with CERT, and I'm a fan and friend and very fond of Bill, and he's been part of all of our lives. And so originally we were planning on honoring him this year with our Clean Power Champion Award, and but then we decided to move it up a little bit to May 19th and do something with Turn, and because that's his one of his homes, his main home, I think. And so Mark and I decided, well, let's do this soon so that we don't miss the bus. So I'd like to ask Mark to start, and then if we can, we've got people from the East Coast that are calling in, and I'd like to give them a chance to get us started, and then let's just everybody say what they got to say. And Mark and I were thinking about, gee, we need to make an album of Marcus's greatest hits.
Oh, thanks, Jan.
The big album.
What kind of statements or whatever, what do you want to get?
Well, I mean, it's a tribute, it's a reminiscence, it's personal, it's business, it's stories, whatever you want. We're recording it and we'll send it to Bill. So
Good, okay.
And there's a couple of things in chat, if they're not there, they're coming, of people that couldn't come join us today, but still wanted to be wanted to say something. So feel free to look there, and let's start with Mark, and then go east, and then we'll just go around.
So let me join John in welcoming everybody to this Bill Marcus celebration. I'm Mark Toney, Executive Director of Turn, and Bill has made tremendous contribution to not just Turn, but to ratepayers all across California and all across the nation. And it's really pretty amazing for someone to have made such an impact in his life. I know this it's just very uncommon for someone to have this kind of impact. So I'm gonna go ahead and John and I are gonna work together to call on people as we see you raise your hands. And we're just asking everybody who feels so moved to say a few words to Bill.
We lost your sound, or at least I did.
Yeah, Mark, we lost your sound, Mark.
Okay.
There you are.
That.
You're back.
That, anybody who feels moved to do so, we're gonna ask to say a few words to Bill directly, okay? Because Bill's gonna be seeing this. So yes, we're here talking among each other, but I encourage people to speak to Bill directly. And so, Bill, thank you for everything you have done for Turn, for California ratepayers. And John, I'm going to turn it back over to you. Maybe you can start calling on a few people who may have already let you know that they're interested in saying something. I've also got a few people that have already let me know they want to say something. Turning it back to you, John.
Thank you, Mark. That's wonderful. I think we were trying to figure out what the money was that Bill had saved, and we can't come up with a number other than it's got to be hundreds of millions of dollars, and not just in California, but across the country. So I'd like to ask Ralph Cavanna to start. He's on the East Coast, along, I think, with John Giesman and maybe Paul Chernick, and let's hear from those that are the farthest away, and then let's circle back to some of the Turn folks, and then we'll go from there.
Well, thank you, John and Mark. I will, at Mark's invitation, now enter something into the record. I hope you can all see this. This was a memorable issue of the MIT Quarterly Journal, curated by the President's Science Advisor. And I enter it into evidence on the proposition that Bill Marcus is the most effective and influential regulatory advocate ever. A proposition that I do not believe will be strongly disputed among this group, but I'm going to go way back on this one. In this issue of the MIT Journal, what the president's science advisor, John Holdren, wanted to do was to document the origins of California's energy efficiency leadership. And he started with a quotation from Leonard Ross, the first appointee to the Public Utilities Commission, Mike remembers, of then Governor Jerry Brown. Leonard Ross said that he regarded conservation as the most important task facing utilities today. But he went on to say that at present, the financial incentives for utilities are for increased sales, not for conservation. Whatever conservation efforts utilities undertake, and I'm quoting Leonard Ross here in a 1975 decision, whatever conservation efforts utilities undertake are the results of good citizenship rather than profit motivation. We applaud these efforts, but we think the task will be better accomplished if financial and civic motivations are not cross purposes. That was the aspiration. Then somebody had to figure out how to do it. The somebody who figured out how to do it was Bill Marcus. And I found, for purposes of this article, his filing with the California Public Utilities Commission 40 years ago, Bill, almost to the day. And this was the first formal revenue decoupling proposal. It was filed with the California PUC by William B. Marcus in April of 1981. And the heart of it is two sentences, just two sentences. Bill, these are your words. I'm going to read them back to you. I got this from you. Total base revenues for forecast sales and base revenues resulting from actual sales will be compared on a quarterly basis. The resulting under collection or over collection will be placed in a balancing account. Rates will be adjusted to amortize the balancing account. That's two sentences. No one had ever thought of that before. This was a way to break the link between utilities' financial health and their commodity sales without eliminating the incentive to save energy for customers. Bill Marcus thought of it. It has become a regulatory norm for the United States and the United Kingdom. It has unleashed energy efficiency investment beyond, I suspect, even Bill's wildest imaginings. 40 years ago, that begins the legacy and the heritage that all of you will now expand upon. But I thought it was a good place to start. Thank you, Bill.
John, you're muted.
Thank you, Ralph. Commissioner Giesman.
Well, I have nothing but the most profound admiration for my research skills from my brother, Ralph. But let me take you a little bit further back than that. And that's the late 1970s, where after Jerry Brown was forced to commit on the Sun Desert nuclear power plant and chose to deny the project, block the project going forward. And John, you'll remember this because you were Victor Calvo's staff at the time.
Exactly.
Bill was one of a very small group of people working for Bob Weisenmiller, who led to the reawakening of the Jerry Brown administration, trying to implement all of the rhetoric that he had engaged in prior to Sun Desert to actually make it happen. And the reason it needed to happen was because we were in a supply crunch. We needed more resources in California. Bill Marcus and several men and women working for Bob got their heads together and came up with what we at the time called alternative energy resources. Energy efficiency, first and foremost, renewable resources. At the time, those were primarily wind, but also cogeneration. And the conclusion that Bill amply demonstrated was that the supply plan the utilities were planning to take us on were fucking nuts. They're going to run us into the ditch. My job as the executive director to the Energy Commission at the time was protect Bill and others like him from the bad guys in the legislature. And let me tell you, there were a lot of bad guys in the legislature at the time, utility induced, attempting to undercut the rationale for what we perceive to be as a preferred energy strategy. Bill was a cornerstone of that. And brother, I'll tell you, the people of California and arguably the people of the world ought to be forever grateful to you for that.
Thank you, John. Paul?
I was trying to figure out what to say. I've known and off and on worked with Bill since about 1975, when we were roommates in Somerville, Massachusetts. He was working as a teaching assistant at the Harvard Kennedy School, and I was getting my master's at MIT. And I graduated, got my master's degree, went to work for the Massachusetts Attorney General doing utility regulation. And Bill blamed me for his getting involved in utility planning and regulation. He thought the things I was telling him about were kind of cool, and he needed to find something to do with his girlfriend at the time, and later his first wife, lured him out to California. And periodically over the years, sometimes a couple times a month and sometimes a couple times a year, one of us would be in touch with the other. First by mail, probably, and telephone, and more recently by email with news about things we were doing, crazy things that utilities were proposing, questions about how to deal with some argument that some utility had come up with. And it was really nice knowing that, Bill, you were out there with ideas and a willingness to kick things around with me. And it's been a real pleasure. I finally got out to see him in California a couple years ago in Woodland, beautiful place. And I enjoy his Facebook postings about his garden and Marie's post. That's all I can think of to say at the moment. Maybe something will inspire me later on, but you guys may be going late into the night, my time.
Thank you, Paul. We've got some hands raised, and then I'm going to do those two hand raised. First, Grace Anderson, and then Jim Lazar, and then I'm going to turn it back to Mark and get some more input from Term. Maybe we'll hear from Mr. Florio. Grace.
Well, thank you, John. And thanks, John and Bob Weisenmiller, for wrapping me into this. It's amazing to see all the faces on the screen. And Bill, hello. I'm going to follow on what John was mentioning and talk about those early days of the Energy Commission, where We had the brilliant and ruthless John Geisman, the brilliant and kind Bob Weisenmiller, and the brilliant and quirky Bill Marcus. And one of those brilliant ideas that came from those folks was this thing called Energy Service Corporation. And it's the essence of what Ralph was talking about. In his work for Bob Weisenmiller, Bill, you got off in a corner with all of your books and your chaos, and you did the math and the analysis that proved that utilities, ratepayers, and stockholders could all benefit by doing energy efficiency, and that they could be energy service corporations that delivered services, not just sold electricity. And that was a big idea in the later 70s. And in fact, on the basis of Bill's work, some of us went around the country and testified in rate cases to stop the proposed second unit of nuclear power plants in Philadelphia and in Massachusetts. So Bill, you are single-handedly critical to that whole movement that was just beginning at that time, to have efficiency that was cheap instead of nuclear power that was expensive and didn't work very well. And I don't know that many of you will be able to see this, but this is a shirt that Bill gave me. It's of Rancho Seco, and it says SECO, Serving Energy Concerns Occasionally. That was because so Bill was instrumental at the same time in the public interest, not just in his professional work at the Energy Commission, of doing the analysis that resulted in showing the math of Rancho Seco that it was going to be better for ratepayers to shut it down than it was going to be to continue to operate it, because it was going to be so expensive to retrofit it, and it didn't work very well anyway. So Bill, thank you for that. I believe, well, I know it was the first operating nuclear power plant that was ever shut down by a grassroots effort. And it would not have happened without you, Bill. So he isn't just an amazing guy with a pen and paper and a calculator. Bill was a beautiful mate and husband to two amazing women. He's such a powerhouse, he could attract these amazing women, and he was so loyal to them. I will never forget, I got to go to the hospital when his first wife was not well. And he was there with her on a Saturday night, and he was sitting in a chair by her bed, and Prairie Home Companion was on. And the two of them, he held her hand and they sang one of the Grand Ole Opry songs that came on that Saturday night. It was one of their favorite shows. They always listened to Prairie Home Companion again. And I'll just close by saying another amazing woman, Leslie. I never saw Bill as happy. Bill, I never saw you as happy as when you and Leslie got your Victorian in Woodland. And I lived out in the country there also at that time, and they would get me to come up, and Bill would make a fine meal, and Leslie would take me aside and give me all her very wise recommendations about life and love life, and just about anything else that I was or wasn't interested in. And the two of them were peas in a pod, and we would walk around Woodland and talk about all the old houses. And, Bill, you have been an instrumental force in the world and in my life, and I really, really appreciate you. I love you, and I thank you for everything you've done.
Okay, next,
I have been,
Jim Lazar, and then Diane Grunick, and then Ed Smeloff, and then back to Mark Tony. And then after Mark, we'll have new hand raise.
well, Bill, you and I have been colleagues and friends for essentially our entire careers. And certainly my career has been better for it. I hope yours has too. You were one of my very first clients who, when at the California Energy Commission, hired me to do this piece of work on a ratepayer perspective, unavoided cost pricing. still depressingly current in how it addresses the risks that consumers avoid when the owner of a power plant is not a regulated utility that leaves it in rate base even when it's not working. And it was you and Dan Meek working together that hired me to do that one. And that kept me busy for a long time doing the kinds of work that you and I both have done. And then we came back together again on sort of my last significant piece of published work, and perhaps it's also one of your last pieces of published work, the electric cost allocation for a new era manual that was published by RAP a couple of years ago that Paul and Bill and I wrote, edited by Mark LaBelle. And this one is going to be in libraries, at commissions and consumer advocates, and used long after I'm gone, and quite possibly after almost everyone on this call is gone. It's a fabulous piece of work at 400 pages. It's certainly not something that any one of us could have done alone. And it's as with the 1982 project, this one is a whole heck of a lot better because, Bill, you put your heart into it. This one's important enough that I'm going to, in a few minutes, drop a link to it in the chat. Anyone who hasn't downloaded the book that Bill and Paul and I wrote together, I urge you to do so. It's been a long career for me. I've now decided I'm not taking anything that has deadlines or deliverables, so I'm pretty much done. And Bill, you've been a part of it for the entire career. Thank you for all you've done to help me, and I hope I've been helpful to you.
And Jim, thank you for reminding me. I had forgotten to say this. For all the time that I spent talking to Bill about our common work interests, the cost allocation manual was the first actual paid work that I ever did with Bill. And there were times when we were representing different clients in the same proceeding, and that was a lot of fun. But you were the one who came up with this idea for a really useful product that also gave me the opportunity to spend a lot of time on the phone with Bill. Thank you, Bill, and with you. It was that was an amazing experience.
Okay, Diane Grunick, and then back to Mark Tony.
Thanks. So I was at the Energy Commission 1977 to 1982 as part of the whole gang here. It's wonderful seeing everybody. And I still remember we were referred to sometimes as the Gang of Four, which was Bill, myself, Bob Weisenmiller, and Dave Marcus. And I want to echo John Giesman. He protected us because we had sort of this way. I was in the legal office and they all worked with Bob. And we woke up and we'd say, hey, here's a fight to take on, or here's an issue to take on. And it was such a wonderful experience because we were young. We were, just starting our careers. And I think we learned from this the wonderful ability when you're working together as a team. And Bill, I just want to say, having worked with you, for almost 5 years, almost daily, you were always not just brilliant, because that we know, but you were so kind and so supportive. And you didn't have your ego ever get in the way of anything. And I think for all of us, that just set a foundation then for the next 40 years of what do we want to be? Visionary, pushing the window, making changes, but thinking of people. So I'll just end by saying, Ralph, I too dug out of my files Bill's historic testimony on decoupling, that the CEC had intervened at the CPUC, and Bill was our witness, and I had the good fortune to be the attorney, and we went through certainly a number of fights, but we ended up in 1982 getting the CPUC to approve it, and that has changed the world. Has changed the world. You know, you created the single most important policy, I think, that we have in our toolkit on decarbonization and clean energy. So Bill, I want to thank you so much for all the love, support, brilliance you've given all of us, and especially me.
Thank you, Diane. Back to Mark Tony.
Thank you, John. What I'm going to do is call on 4 people who had notified me ahead of time that they wanted to say a few words. So let me start with Mike Florio and invite him to say a few words.
Wow. I don't think I'd be sitting here today if it wasn't for Bill Marcus. Bill, you taught me so much. I was a green young lawyer out of NYU working for Sylvia Siegel. And I think the first memory I have is Sylvia got DOE money to put on a series of conferences for consumer advocates in the Western states. It was something called the Western Consumer Utility Energy Center. And we had this conference out at Fort Cronkite where we slept in barracks, and Sudine Kelly, who of course went on to great things, was a young attorney with, I think it was the New Mexico AG's office. And, you know, there was a lot of mingling and talking. And at one point, she saw Bill and I together, and she came up to us and she looked at me and she said, "I thought you were the most intense person I had ever met. I've ever met on these issues." And then I met him, pointing at Bill, because we were both totally enmeshed in the details. And I think that was the conference that ended with a bonfire on the beach and various alcoholic and other substances being shared. And that was the beginning of 40 years of incredible work together. Bill was just amazing. I remember during the energy crisis when we were dealing with, you know, the utilities going bankrupt and all of that. And I was working with Lenny Goldberg, who was Turn's lobbyist at the time. And we were trying to figure out, you know, what would it take to get the utilities creditworthy again? Of course, we said, call Bill. And in 2 hours, he had an analysis of what it would take to get the credit metrics to get the utilities financially viable again. I remember Lenny saying at the time, it would cost $200,000 to get this from one of those big consulting firms, and Bill put it together in 2 hours. And I think it was as good as anything else we ever saw. Gosh, the fights about marginal customer costs, we worked that one for about 10 years before we finally got a decent decision out of the commission, which lasted until recently, and hopefully we could nail it back down again. But
I sincerely hope not, Mike.
Yeah. You know, Bill always with a big smile, always with, I mean, when Bill was your witness, you wanted the other side to cross-examine him because he could, he could do it all in one answer. I think I say Matt Brady there. I remember Matt telling me once, one time he had Bill as a witness and he started the answer to a question with "but," and even Matt felt compelled to try to control his witness and get him to give the yes before the but. And the but was, of course, paragraphs long of why the question was misleading and misguided.
Great.
Bill, always a great guy, professionally and personally, just meant the world to me, and God bless you, buddy.
Thank you, Mike. I'm gonna call on Haley Goodson next.
Thank you. So Bill, I'm speaking to you, but I'm going to speak like I'm speaking to the group because I think it's going to make it a little bit easier. So I am one of the newbies. I've only known Bill for 20 years. That's it. And when, Bill's been sort of a core part of my career at Turn. He was I first started and there was Bill and they were like, "You're working with Bill." And so I was working with Bill and I was very eager to do a good job. And, the first couple of cases that we did together, GRCs, I checked all of his numbers. I recalculated everything. I checked his citations. I thought, I just got to be sure that this is right. And what do I know? Because I don't know anything. And over time, I learned that was completely unnecessary. And that was a nice relief to know that I had such an incredible expert who truly was an expert. And I could sit back and relax a little bit and just make sure the pleadings were formatted well and defend him on those wonderful cross-examination opportunities whenever they came. But I think something that my experience with Bill, aside from just being so incredibly competent and quick and efficient and right, has also been that he's kind of been a backstop for me. And as over my 20 years at Turn, I've wanted to figure things out for myself and I'm going to connect the dots and I'm going to do the work and I'm going to figure it out. But so nice to know that at the end of that process, I could just call Bill, make sure I'm right, find out if I'm wrong. That's been such an incredible resource to have, sort of a go-to person. But I have to say, as Diane mentioned so accurately, all of my years later with Bill, he continued to be so kind, so patient with me, even as I was doing all this crazy editing and review, so patient. He never said, "You don't have to do that." And really, he did not bring ego to the work. And so whenever I, sent edits or challenged something, he took it in stride, has always taken it in stride. And I've been so grateful. And I think that as a relative newbie to the field allowed me to kind of get up the learning curve. He really gave me space to learn and start developing my own command of the issues and to treat me more like a peer. And that's been an incredible gift. Not everybody can do that. Not everybody can have the kind of depth of expertise that Bill does and yet be so graceful with people who were at a much different place in their career. So I am grateful. And, Bill, I thank you for always being right there, helping me become a better and better Turn attorney and ratepayer advocate over the years. Thank you very much. I'm glad 20 years later to be able to say all this to you, to say thank you.
Thank you, Haley. John White's informed me that there's a couple of people on a borrowed computer at a family gathering. So John, I'm gonna turn it back to you before we go to the other turn.
Thank you, Mark. My dear friends and co-founders of CERT, Jim Caldwell and Jan McFarland, would like to say a few words.
Unmute, Jim.
Okay, how's that? Like I say, I didn't really mean to crash the line or anything, and but cannot miss this opportunity to talk to Bill. You know, Bill is one of those human beings that the economists always wish that they were, and you know, Bill was the best student of the human condition that I've ever known. And the thing is that he always wanted to make it better, and that he would work as hard and think as hard until it was better, and until it was. And I've never ever known him to say anything inane, mean. It was always insightful, and I always felt, as we said here, that I never knew that I was right until I heard Bill say, "Yes, you're right." So thanks, Bill. I'm a better man just for knowing you for all of these years, and be well.
Bill, I really appreciate and I'm grateful we crossed paths. I believe I met you in January of 1978 at the Energy Commission. You've always been a friend and inspiration. We've had a little bit of travel, lots of good fun, and you know, you were a great mentor, and I love you. Thank you.
Thank you both. Back to Mark.
Thank you. Thank you very much. If I could call on Bob Finkelstein.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you. Hi, Bill. It's funny, if you hear from Mike and Haley, I am a middle tier as between two of them. I've only known Bill for 30 years, and my very first recollection of work at Turn involved Bill as the newbie, and they knew I was going to focus on electricity issues. So they arranged for Mike and Bill, when Bill was in town for something else, to give me an hour tutorial on how revenue allocation and rate design works. And so I sat in the office with Mike and Bill for an hour. And for the first 2 minutes, I think I understood what they were talking about. And after that, it was just off to the races. They just kept goading each other with ideas, and the other person would respond, and they just were having a great time. After about 5 minutes, I put down my pencil and just listened. But it did leave a very lasting impression. Well, a couple. One is like Haley was saying, it confirmed just how low I was on the learning curve for these issues. But it also made very clear that it could be a lot of fun to get to that, something closer to that higher point on the curve, and actually understand these issues. These were important issues. They're important to the public. They're important to the consumers. California was always going to be ahead of everywhere else. And it was enough to convince somebody that wasn't quite sure energy regulatory work was going to be my calling. You know, 30 years later, I'm still doing it. And Bill, you either get the credit or the blame. You can decide which. But so Bill left me with a couple of really important lessons that have helped me keep going throughout all this. One is, Bill, you always had such joy that you brought to the work. And that's an odd thing to say, given how wonky the work is and you know, how number intensive it can be. But to hear Bill do his instantaneous analysis and get to the right answer and listen to him work through the process, he was in his element. Bill, it was always just, you were so happy at those moments that it was a delight to be part of it. the other thing, Bill, that I learned from you is from the other early memory I have from you is hearing from you of, yeah, I'm not going to be available for this month and a half because I'm going on vacation. The ability to, you always made sure that you had your life in addition to your work, and the two, you were really good about not letting one interfere with the other. And that was an important lesson. We're doing work with issues that can be very time consuming, the magnitude of the issue and just the nature of the work. It's easy to let it be all consuming. And Bill, you were always a great example for, you got to take time for yourself. You have to have interests outside of your work. You know, coming to your house, I came to a party and hung out with this collection of the most interesting people that I think I've ever been around. And that was great. That was an important lesson to me. So Bill, I thank you for all that. You know, whatever I've achieved in 30 years is really due to you, because I was always either riding on your coattails or trying to imitate your analysis. So thank you very much for all of that.
Thank you, Bob. Let me go to Matt Friedman.
Thanks, everyone. I'm Matt Friedman. I'm also an attorney at Turn. And like Haley, I'm a relative newcomer because I've only worked with Bill for 2 decades. And what that means is that I have a lot still to learn from him. Together, we worked on a variety of cases: general rate cases, rate design, gas generation, nuclear power, Mojave coal-fired plant, Mountain View, Diablo Canyon, renewable energy, fixed charges, rate design, baseline quantities. We're still working on the phase 2 general rate case for PG&E together right now. I'm still trying to interpret his testimony and make sure that we win in that case. And throughout it all, Bill has repeatedly demonstrated the qualities of true mastery. He taught me and others so much about how to analyze the claims made by utilities and how to make an impact in regulatory proceedings. Literally every case he was in, he put on a clinic for others. And he was in his own league with respect to issue spotting. He always found bits of money everywhere. It's like he knew where to look. He should have patented his analysis, looking at the historical data, finding trends, applying all of his techniques to shaving money off every utility request. Always able to find something that we could get out of these cases, and you put them together and a bunch of little stuff becomes something big. And like Mike said, we loved having him testify on our behalf in regulatory proceedings because he would make the utility lawyers regret virtually every question they asked. I liked nothing more than to know that there was an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours reserved on Bill. Over time, they stopped reserving time on him to question him because they knew that it would just hurt their own case. His best work was when he would get mad at the utilities. He always ended up with some great zingers. And he came up with some forms of analysis that really changed the course of the policy itself. He helped to stop utilities in California from owning renewable energy by demonstrating they're not passing through the tax credits efficiently. He said famously, utilities make bad banks. I always remember that. I think he also made up the term cats and dogs, which is now in widespread use in phase 2 general rate cases to refer to like little pots of money. He single-handedly forced utility shareholders to eat 50% of the Nuclear Energy Institute dues that the utilities paid. He did that over and over again. And he's not just a fighter, he worked well with other parties. In the phase 2 general rate cases, for the better part of the last couple of decades, they've been settled by simply delegating to Bill and Barbara Barkovich and a few others who would just figure out the outcome and let us all know what the deal was at the end of the day. Every time that Bill prepares testimony, I, as his lawyer, have to spend the rest of the case trying to understand his analysis because he's so far ahead of me and the other lawyers on every case we're working together. And even after working with him for a long time on this, I'm still trying to figure out how to understand the new customer only method. If anybody has any ideas, please let me know offline. Look, there's no younger version of Bill Marcus. He doesn't really have any peers. There's just one Bill Marcus, and he's in a class of his own. And thank you, Bill, for everything you've done to contribute to our work, to making the planet a better place, and to leaving something to the next generation. We'll do our best to keep fighting the fight on your behalf. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. And the final person I'm going to call on before I turn it back to John is Kevin Woodruff.
Thank you, Mark. I've known Bill about 35 years also. You're a relative, I mean, sort of in the middle of the tiers, you might say, but he was always at another consulting firm. I don't have all the C stories that so many of you have to tell about him. But, I just knew there was this amazing guy who did amazing work at this other firm. And sometimes we were able to engage him and sometimes we had to compete. But when I went out on my own in 2002, Bill really helped me get started in my career as an independent consultant. And Bill, speaking directly to you, you were an inspiration to me. And I appreciate you, everything you've done for me. I also appreciate everything you've done for the state's ratepayers. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Kevin. So I'm going to turn it back over to John to call on some people before he turns it back to me. Go ahead, John. John, I think you're on mute. Let's see what you got here.
Next in line is Bob Weisenmiller.
Thanks, John. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Good. Really appreciate the opportunity to reach out to Bill today. Obviously, this is a celebration of his life and all the things that he's accomplished. I'm going to talk about how I met Bill. I think how all of us met Bill in one of those twist of fate moments. So I was at the Energy Commission. Initially, I worked as an advisor to commissioner and then set up an office, a special projects office. And as I was setting it up, Prop 13 passed. And the day the vote was being tallied, I got the quiet word that A, it was going to pass, B, there was going to be a freeze on state hires at the end of the day. So I promptly ran around and decided I was going to get out job offers and get those out. And I offered one through Mark Ziering. I discovered that Bill Marcus wanted to come to California. So sure enough, I put together the paperwork to hire Bill Marcus into my office. I think we actually backdated the date, but we won't get into that. And sure enough, Bill took the offer. And that all started history. I think Grace has already talked about his work on energy services. Diane talked about the PGGRC and Ralph, which was certainly very historic. He also worked with Stan Smith and Dan Meek on the Northwest, and he worked with Bert Mattson and myself on avoided cost pricing. So, and in his spare time, I think as is mentioned, he went after Rancho Seco. So Bill was remarkably productive, as he still is, remarkably bright, and a pleasure to work with. And I think has touched all of our lives, and certainly regulation in California and throughout the country in many historic ways. Again, thanks for your innovation and your brilliance.
Thank you, Bob. Next, Ed Smeloff.
Hi, Bill. This is Ed Smeloff, and I wanted to thank you for all the work you did pro bono on behalf of the ratepayers of Sacramento. I had the wonderful opportunity to appoint Bill to this thankless rate advisory committee after I had stirred up a bunch of problems up at SMUD. And Bill not only is whip smart, but really compassionate, cared about fairness, cared about equity, and SMUD's rates were about as backward as you could get back in 1987, 1988, when Bill helped straighten things out there. They had declining block rates, and the industrial customers were given promotional rates. And Bill came in and worked in a very collegial way with a number of other rate experts, and was able to carry the day, just a result of his personality, his humor, and obviously his keen intelligence. So, Bill, miss not having seen you so much in recent years, but I really remember the days when we worked together. I remember your sense of humor, and it just really makes me feel, warm and special to be part of this event with all your friends here. But really want to thank you for what you did on behalf of the citizens of Sacramento, not only on race, but of course your key work in the analysis around Rancho Seco. Thank you, Bill.
John, you were muted.
Dan Smutney Jones is next.
There you go. Thanks, Sean. And Bill, thank you very much for being my first energy client, or my first energy witness, actually. When I began my life sentence, Dan Hamron sentenced me in 1987 to IEP for the remainder. We were engaged in a lot of activities, basically pushing back on PG&E and Edison, a couple of other things. But we were very active in the electricity reports that the Energy Commission was engaged in at the time as the basis for that wonderful exercise called the BRPU that many on this call spent a good part of their lives, which resulted in absolutely nothing coming out of it. But that's a different story. But I think the important part of this, and an important contribution that was made there, was Jan decided it was a brilliant idea. If we start looking at the carbon emissions profiles or the climate change impacts of various types of technologies. Hired Peter Glick at the Pacific Institute to basically analyze what the power market looked like, and we put that in an ER. And you and Gayatri and Jeff Nahigian were successful in putting testimony together and whatever to get the attention to it. And this infuriated the Western Coal Association, which sent an angry letter to the chairman of the Energy Commission saying we had no business of talking about any of this stuff in this public hearing, and that we should ignore, they should ignore everything we were saying. Of course, that had the effect of having people kind of talk about it. So while it took a while for all of that to catch on, that was one of the first efforts, I think, out there, and you had a lot to do with that. But that's also, I think, indicative of when I'm listening to this conversation today. We have an alphabet soup of proceedings that all of us have worked on. Some of us together, sometimes on opposite sides. Sometimes we've never worked together. But the reality is, there's all these things that you've been engaged in that have been very, very important. And I'm a firm believer we're all difference. And I think it's very clear that the difference you've made, both to many of us personally, but to society, humanity as a whole, all that alphabet soup ends up with respect to making people's lives better, making ratepayers' lives better, making the planet a better place to live and a better place for the future. So at any rate, thank you very much. And I look forward to seeing you on the other side. Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. Back to you, Mark.
Thank you, John. I see that Marcel Haviger has his hand up.
Thank you very much, Mark. Hello, everyone. Hey, Bill. I'm going to be brief since Haley and Bob and others said, everything I'd love to say. So I'll just want to say first, thank you very much, Bill, for being so patient with me. I came into this as an attorney, totally new to the energy space, almost zero background in economics or corporate finance. And I think in the 2003 Edison rate case, you started schooling me on working cash. Someone who never had a business and had to deal with working cash. You were patient. You were patient enough to explain things. I had to push to ask questions, but I really appreciate your being willing to educate the uninitiated. Thank you so much. And second, hey, I just want to thank you so much for your integrity. I worked in a consulting firm in the water sector for a few years, and we very much tried to make reports that suit the needs of our clients. And I always knew that if I asked you a question about an issue and what position we should take, you would tell me the honest truth. If it was something that you thought we shouldn't argue, or you couldn't really support in good faith, or was just not technically, intellectually, or from a public policy perspective right, you would tell me that and you wouldn't push it. And that was so wonderful to know, because I knew that whatever positions you took, I could totally support. And plus I knew you were always 100% right. So that helped. So thanks so much.
Thank you, Marcel. I think we have no more hands up, but
I can see some hands up, John.
Okay, good.
Let me go ahead and call on the hands that I see up. And I'm also, we want to make sure Bill hears this well. So if you're not speaking, if you could be on mute, it's going to help Bill hear this better, okay? So who I have next up is Cynthia Mitchell. Great to see you, Cynthia.
Oh, so good to see all of you. I just got the message that this was happening. Oh, about 30 minutes ago. I was out on a hike. So, Bill, you and I have known each other since the late 80s. I remember you were in a hearing in Reno in the Nevada Consumer Advocate's office. I was still working for Fred Schmidt at the time, and you had a terrible cold. But you wouldn't stop talking to me and blowing your nose. And by the end of the hearing, you wanted to work with me. And we started tag teaming on all kinds of things over the years. And for the most part, you were always teaching me. And you were my rock. There were so many times in this field, in this business, where I just would feel like I was wrapped around the axle and I couldn't think my way through. And I would almost be in a panic. And I could call you, and you'd always get me through it. And I have to say, I understood about 2/3 of everything. There would be points where I just have to take time out because your brain would just be so expansive. I loved how you would stand in my kitchen there in Reno and talk about being a sword rattler, wanting to have a saber here at your side. And, I would talk to you about that I would drape you with a big sash, and you could come into the back of the hearing room and rattle your saber. And just this winter, with COVID and everything, I watched that Netflix series, The Queen's Gambit, chess prodigy and all. And, that's you. That's the way you have been in this business all these years, that you can visualize the entire construct and see, all the moving parts. Like very, very few others, just gifted beyond belief. And you used to say that you would play with the numbers or tease the numbers until you got them to say what you wanted. And that was a great, lesson I took from you, because it is so very true. And then I don't want to take up so much time, but we've been very close. And some of what I've appreciated with you so very much is the very deeply spiritual and religious side aspect that you and I shared together. And And so be in your faith. Be in your faith, and know that you are going to the greater consciousness, and watch out, divine universe, because you will shortly be getting a hit of expansion of intelligence with a heart beyond belief. And so I love you, Bill. I love you, and I will think of you forever and ever.
Thank you, Cynthia. I've got Tom Long next on my list.
Cynthia, that was beautiful. Thank you so much. Bill, I've learned a lot from you over the years. I think I'd summarize it by saying I learned from you that cost of service regulation of public utilities can be, of all things, fun and exciting. Your passion for these issues is infectious and inspiring, and has helped keep me going now that I'm in my 35th year of doing this work. So I just want to thank you for being an inspiration to so many of us. Thank you, Bill.
Thank you, Tom. And my final person before I turn it back to John is Jennifer Dowdell.
Okay. Hey, Bill, I just want to say that we haven't gotten to work together as much as certainly I would have liked. And that's extreme selfishness on my part, but your generosity so far has been just exceptional, and I'm so appreciative. And I would also like to say that I first encountered you, Bill, on the opposite side when I worked for PG&E. And, you know, in working for Turn, I've learned you're not just a scare story utility criminals tell their children, like Victor Sose in The Usual Suspects. You're just an exceptional individual. And I'm so glad that I got to work with you even a little bit. Thank you.
Thank you, Jen. I'm gonna turn it back over to John to do a little bit more facilitating.
Thank you, Mark. Next, we have Jan Hamron.
Hi, Bill. Love you. I worked with Bill. I've known Bill for also 40 some years. And when we started IEP, I inherited an attorney. So apologies to the attorneys here. So I inherited an attorney and I have Bill. And I found that the attorney would talk to Bill and find out what questions he should ask. And then he would go back to Bill and find out what he should do with the answers that he got. And it didn't take me long to figure out we had an extra person in there that we didn't really need. I had a very limited budget. So ended up with Bill was the attorney. And we gave him an award as an attorney in practice, at least. So other than when he was on the stand, but when anyone else was on the stand, he would act as the attorney. To follow up on a couple of other things, that just the humor and delight of working with Bill. He loved to get additional information on the record besides what his testimony had said. And we would keep score and try to see how many new things he could get on the record when he was testifying besides what was in his testimony. And one of his favorite lines was, "I'm glad you asked me that," as he'd pull something out of his pocket and the utility attorneys would turn green. And as was stated earlier, they finally learned not to ask him any questions. But I was there one time, there was a new attorney, I think for San Diego Gas and Electric, and he started asking Bill questions, and attorneys for the other two utilities were sitting next to me. covering their heads and saying, oh no, you don't ask Bill questions. For heaven's sakes, don't ask Bill questions. It's been an honor working with you, Bill, and a delight from a personal standpoint. Love you.
Thank you, Jan. Next, we have Barbara Barkovich.
Well, thank you. Bill, I have fond memories and relish the times that you, Dexter, and I used to negotiate rate case settlements. The situation appeared to be impossible, and somehow or other, we always pulled a rabbit out of a hat. And one of the things that I particularly remember is the pre-conversations when he and I would say, okay, who's going to play bad cop and who's going to play good cop? I think he really kind of liked being bad cop. But, we must have done that for, well over 20 years. And it just became kind of like, he and Dexter and I, it was like an old married triple, couple with three people that would just kind of listen to everything that was going on and go, all right, you think we can do this one? You think we can, win one for the Gipper one more time? And then we would just slowly, step by step, plot our way through things. And I don't know that we made a huge number of friends along the way, but this is the first PG&E fully litigated general rate case since the mid 1990s. So I think we have a pretty good track record. And I certainly, one of the things I miss, and since I'm partially retired, is negotiating with Bill and Dexter. So Bill, it was always a joy to do that with you. And thank you for that. And blessings to you.
Thank you, Barbara. Now we have Bridget Rowan.
Hi, Bill. Hi, everybody. So Bill, I'm here to remind people that your influence extends beyond the California borders. And Montreal thanks you, Quebec thanks you, Canada thanks you, and your Canadian clients as well. Bill, it's been an absolute pleasure and to work with you, and a privilege. I apologize for dragging you up to Montreal in bad weather. I thank you for shedding some regulatory light on the shenanigans of the gas industry in Quebec, and I won't go into the finer points of cost allocation in natural gas, although if ever there was a crowd to do it with, this might be it. It was such a pleasure. I've heard people talk about Bill's brilliance and his humor and his approach to the work. At one point in our Quebec regulatory case, we've been doing, it's interminable. We've been doing it over the past few years. We had two American experts, one of whom is President Paul Chernick, as well as Bill, who was on my team. And it was delightful that the two public interest experts were actually much stronger than the energy company, much stronger than than industry. So Bill, it's been such a pleasure to work with you. Haley put it so eloquently that you lift your colleagues. It's those who don't have your expertise or experience or brilliance. You are a brilliant colleague, and you have not at all been condescending. And you're greatly respectful. You're very respectful to. You told me you respect strong, intelligent women a great deal, and it is, in a quite a male-dominated field. It was always wonderful to have Bill on my side, and as a colleague and a friend. Your generosity and your fairness and your brightness have been so appreciated. And it's been great also getting to know you on a personal level. You are a bon vivant. So much fun to have dinner with, have drinks with. And I appreciated hearing about your fondness and your love for Marie. And I'm sending you and Marie my warmest wishes, and to you, much love for a smooth journey. Thank you.
Next, we have Dave Marcus.
Dave, you're on mute.
Unmute, Dave.
You're still muted, Dave.
No, I think I'm off now. Okay, let's try that all over again. So
There you are.
Yes, can you hear me now? I'm also bringing greetings from Mark Ziering, who very much wanted to be here today, but I think is not. Bill and Mark and I all met 40 plus years ago at the Energy Commission and worked together there. And then Bill and I have been on not opposing sides, but sort of right angle sides in many, many California utility rate cases. Bill, you for turn and me for Q, you trying to keep the utilities from wasting money, me trying to get them to spend money on reliability. And so we've often worked together. We've talked a lot over the years. And I just wanted to talk about a couple of anecdotes that are an aspect that other people wouldn't have seen, having to do with what a great witness you are. And one of these is in Alberta. It's a Canadian story. And Bill was being cross-examined in Alberta, and the cross-examining attorney had delusions of being Perry Mason. And he says to Bill, well, have you taken this same position in other proceedings? Bill says, yes. You've never taken an opposite position to this in some other proceeding just because your client had an opposite opinion? Bill says, no. And the attorney lifts up his hand and pulls the, I have here a document. And he starts reading a transcript into the record. Mr. Marcus says, and he turns to, and he reads what Mr. Marcus says, and he turns to Bill. He says, well, isn't that the opposite of what you're saying here? Yeah, it's kind of the opposite. Well, didn't you say that? No, I didn't say that. And the attorney just turns livid because he has the document right there in his hand. How can you deny this? And Bill says, well, that's Dave Marcus. Me. Because he's read the document upside down in the guy's hand, and he's seen that it's a California case that Diane Grinick and I have been in. And so he knew this was coming, and he just kept his mouth shut and let the guy dig the hole. And I think that was completely Bill, to just let the other side dig as deep as they want, because he was way ahead of them all along. There was another anecdote where I was working for the California AG in a small hydro case, and there was a question about the SO4 contract that this developer had. And I said to my attorney, well, instead of discovery, what if we just call him up and ask him? Because it's just a question of which box he checked in the various options in the contract. And the attorney says, sure, go ahead and try. I call him up, I say who I am. I say, I just want to know in, paragraph 4, subpart B, did you pick option 1 or option 2? And he's very forthright, says, I picked whatever he says. And I think, well, gee, he's being so cooperative, I'll ask him another question. And I ask him another question, and he says, but you know that, Bill, you're the one who told me to do it that way. At which point I had to explain that there was more than one energy consultant in California named Marcus. So he and I would call each other up and tell each other these stories, because it happened fairly often what are the odds of two energy consultants in California named Marcus, unrelated? And so over the years, we've had a lot of fun with that. And Bill, I want to thank you for that, as well as thanking you for all the great work you've done. Thanks.
Hey, John, you were muted.
Sorry. Next, we had Garrick Jones.
Oh, cool. I figured out how to wave. I was thinking I wasn't waving or raising my hand. I'm sorry. Am I unmuted?
Yes.
Okay. So I was fortunate enough to work with Bill for 10 years. I guess I'm another even more newbie than the rest of you. And I guess just before I start, I'd like to let you know, Bill, that the background behind me is from the Rancho Seco recreational area. And I went paddle boarding on it last summer. So I thought that would be appropriate. Bill, you were a kind and generous mentor. You were kind with your words, your deeds, your humor, your patience. You were generous with your time, your wisdom, and your insight. I'll never forget the times we were stuck in the office late into the evening, working together, both working away. It was tough, but fun. And even then, in those times when we were working past the time that everyone else had gone home, you left time to discuss, revenue requirements, rate of return, revenue allocation, whatever it was. You were there. I'll forever be grateful and honored for the opportunity that you gave me to work next to you. And also never forget the time that you brought a 1974 Chateau Montelena to the JBS Christmas party. And every one of the 15-person party got a sip. And what a beautiful sip it was.
It was. Bravo.
Yeah. So thanks, Bill.
We may have some others joining. I want to say a couple of things about work and fun that I've got to have with Bill. Barbara Barkovich and Mike Fleur will remember, I think, that moment when we were all sitting around a table trying to figure out how to keep Edison out of bankruptcy in the aftermath of the power crisis. And somebody said, I think it may have been Barbara, said, we better take a look at those Department of Water Resources contracts, the $40 billion that had been signed by Mike Peavy and Dave Freeman and Vikram Budraja. And I remember when Barbara and Bill came out of the room, I think Gary Shunion was there from Edison, and they were the ones that got to go and take a look at the contracts, and they came out and their faces were ashen. And we realized that we had a big problem, that the deal we were working on to try to save Edison without having the small ratepayers get stuck with the bill was going to be difficult. So we went on later with my dear friend Don Fields, who couldn't be with us, to Bill. We decided to ask Bill to do an analysis of the contracts and identify the worst ones and what was wrong with them. So we ended up doing a report called The Dirty Dozen. And Bill supplied the details, and he was very studious, very thoughtful, didn't take any liberty, just said, this is what you left on the table. This is how the generator got more than they should have, and here's how to fix it. And we had a meeting with Calpine, which at the time was a member of ours, not for long. And they said, what are you doing? How can you put us on this list? I said, well, because you qualify. It's only one of your 4 contracts, but Bill showed you how to fix it. And anyway, we went on to that. And then the second, but it was just fun to watch him work. And the other moment that I remember is we were asked by Dave Freeman and Friends of the Earth to do an analysis of comparing the future Diablo to a zero carbon portfolio. And Bill had all the data from the rate cases about all the money that it was going to cost. And rather than do a press release, when we got the study done, we called up PG&E with Ralph's help and told them that we had done this analysis and would they like to see it before we released it. And they said, we absolutely would. And they called us back the next day and said, we'd like to talk. Would you all be willing to sign an NDA? And Bill's work led to the voluntary decision by PG&E to close Diablo Canyon. And anyway, he was just a huge amount of fun to work with. As someone said, a bon vivant. I also want to acknowledge the love and support that he's had from Marie and the beautiful times that they've had together. And you're just a great human being, my friend. And we love you, and we are going to be telling stories about you for a long time. But as you can see today, there's a lot of love for you and an enormous amount of professional admiration and respect, because more than most people, I think you made a huge difference in the world. So do we have others? Oh, we have Greg Russoven.
Yeah, you got that mostly right. Greg Russovan. Hi, I worked with Bill for over 28 years. Hello, Bill. It's good to be talking with all your friends here. I wanted to just say something as one of the other JBS constituencies here. A mentor and a leader, but also in the midst of some of the most stressful times I've had in a work environment, trying to get ready for a rate case or anything else. He also could balance that with a relaxed tone in the office and stuff. So some of the, just a passionate man with a killer work ethic, along with Jeff and Garrick and Gayatri, and just managed to certainly keep me always underwater, never fully understanding the analytic models that I was doing or the demographic statistical analysis. And the good thing about you, Bill, is you kind of always knew what the answer was. So when I would mess something up, you could say, well, it's that cell right there. He would take a look, you would take a look at a spreadsheet and just point out the thing that was wrong on it. That was such a relief, as was the only time by choice that I ever appeared on a stand, and how comfortable it was to have you sitting next to me, because I knew no matter what question was asked, if I didn't know the answer, you certainly did. So what a pleasure it was. And I'm going to try and do something here. And I'm sorry for Garrick. I don't know if I can share this screen. What do we got here? Oh, here we go. I'll share two things. This is before Garrick. I apologize, Garrick, but I wanted, come on, pick one of those. Can I get that? Can you see that? If you can see this, this is the atmosphere at JBS, both on and off, out of the office, just with Bill with a beard. So I just wanted to.
Greg, just to say, that's Aaron Brockovich. That's what we saw.
Yes, well, that's the movie. Yes, it was the movie. Yes, and Jeff, and hopefully this will lead into this. The middle one is golf days at a JBS day. Is so beyond just the excellent consultant and that he was also a good guy to work with, including those bottles of wine that Garrick mentioned. So I'll leave it at that. Thank you, Bill.
We also have Ian.
Sorry about the delay. I can echo and reinforce what everybody else has said about Bill's brilliance and insights and amazing technical abilities and grace under pressure. But what I want to emphasize in my relationship with Bill is his generosity, of how there was no better mentor than Bill, not just because he was so capable, but he was also just so welcoming, so open to help you learn what is a very difficult work we do under a lot of pressure, and the consequences are large, and to do it well does involve some degree of personal sacrifice, and being in the office or wherever you are working late. And something Bridget can talk about also, the minibar peanuts. You're in a hotel room and the utility has thrown a lot of information at you at the last minute and you're trying to figure it out. And you know that you're up late and you're having minibar peanuts and you're going to be hassled about the fact that those are expensive. And to have somebody like Bill to work with and to learn how to navigate that and how to have that insights. And as Greg pointed out, look at a spreadsheet in this sea of numbers and find out what's wrong. And Bill had almost a second sense of that. And he was able to develop that in other people. And that was just an incredible gift. And I think Bill saw that as part of his work, not just because he was a very warm, welcoming person, but he knew he needed a team. And that was also emphasized, that in an area where there's a lot of ego, and he did not have that. He was very much guided by trying to help the world and help other people. And I was very gifted to be able to be part of that, as all of the rest of you were.
Thank you, Ian. I think we have a hand up from Rhonda Mills. Can you unmute Rhonda and join us?
Hi, guys. Hi, Bill. Hi, Marie. I love you guys a lot. There's so many people on this call today that are my family for so long, my professional family. And Bill, you've been there in my life since the early 90s when John hired me. And all those things are true. Bill is brilliant. Bill is so many amazing things that start with the word G, like generous and great. But he's also, and he taught me to be a guerrilla, right? Like our work, you guys, we're doing guerrilla warfare, right? We're up against the utilities and the oil companies, and they got millions of gray-suited lobbyists out the door, right? And it was just little us. And that small little group that I had the privilege to come into. And in 2000, I left SAC and I went to Los Angeles and opened up an office for CERT down there. And I had Bill in my pocket, like I always did. And I didn't know a lot. I was just a kind of a warrior for a cause that didn't know how dumb I was sometimes, but I knew I had Bill to back me up and give me. He did so many things. There's just so many things. I can't even describe all the reports, all the things we did that were just Bill and me and John and Dave Olson or Jan McFarland or Jim Caldwell. And we changed the course for sure of Los Angeles. Now that ship is still trying to turn, and it's made some, the engine stalled once or twice and stuff like that. But we went down there with like a 10-page report that Bill wrote, that Shab, I think, wrote the introduction on, that was like, why we can shut down gas and nukes at LA and hydro at DWP and do solar and wind and geothermal instead. And with that, we kind of changed the world. But really, one day, I actually got to know Bill after working with him for a long time, and him doing things for me in my career that made me look great. And I get to brag about work that I got, things that I got to accomplish, but I got to be his friend one day. It just happened. And I don't get to see you. No. I'm really grateful for Marie. Love you, Bill.
Thank you, Rhonda. We appreciate you. Do we have any other hands up or folks that are moved to speak?
Yeah, John,
Eric
can you hear me? Oh,
yes.
Eric, after you.
Okay, thank
Yes,
you.
please.
I just want to say that Bill has been so phenomenal and important in my life, and I was so pleased and blessed to spend 3.5 hours with him yesterday and just say goodbye to him. So I probably can't talk anymore, but I was going to try to tell you about how well Bill parties. He actually does. I mean, you've been there. Of course, Florio, you know, Matt, Bob Finkelstein, Cindy Prawl, and a ton of you folks. I mean, he loves to drink wine, to play, to be completely silly, completely ridiculous, and he's brilliant at that. So I just want to bring that up as something that I just, he's remarkable. I love you, Bill. Okay, that's all I can say. Thank you.
Thank you, Eric.
Yeah, hi, John, this is Jeff Nahigian.
Thank you, Jeff.
Yeah, hi. Yeah, so thanks. Really nice to see all you folks. Haven't seen you in many years. I've been somewhat retired here. So everything you've said about, you know, about Bill and the joy of working with him, I got on steroids because I got to do it every day since 1987. And there's nothing, it's hard to describe how joyful it is to be able to be in that situation, to hang on to this guy's coattails, to be able to get into situations that I would never have ever been able to get into, to be able to speak with him, to have that opportunity, and even in Broderick, California, in the lowest rent place you could possibly find. Thank God for that. So it was everything I could hope for a career, Bill. Everything. And I thank you. And that's about it. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you very much, Jeff. I see that Dan Meek has just arrived and wonder if, Dan, you might like to say a word or two.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
I remember meeting Bill back in the late 70s, and how many nights we stayed up all night together at the California Energy Commission in the 1980s, working on the biennial report and other projects. Bill was so generous with his time and expertise. He even came up to Oregon on occasions to testify for ratepayer groups for me at the Oregon Public Utility Commission. And the attorneys and experts from the utilities up here were absolutely shocked to encounter someone who was so many steps ahead of them in his answers. They just couldn't deal with it. So I just want to thank Bill for all of his help and express my appreciation for his friendship for, wow, 40 years.
Thank you, Dan. Well, I think we may have come to the end of our time. Anybody else would like to speak? Feel free to add, but yes.
I got all broken up because I love Bill so much and I'm so far away from you all. But I forgot that one thing he taught us. Remember that really important line he taught us that we could always use? We have charts and graphs to back us up, so fuck off. He had these buttons he passed out. We have charts and graphs to back us up.
That was courtesy of Bill and Leslie.
Great stuff, you guys.
That was Leslie's, yeah.
Well, thank you, everybody, for joining this wonderful celebration of Bill Marcus. And Bill, thank you so much for everything you've done. Let's all wave at Bill.
Hey, Bill.
Thank you, Bill.
You know it, Bill.
Thanks, Bill.
Yeah, man.
Thank you.
Thank you, Bill.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bill.
Love you, Bill.
We love you.
Thank you. We love you.
Love you, Bill.
Love you, Bill. Hang in. Peace.